You can't survive your hurt and pain. The hurt and pain is not what kills you. The killer is feeling hopeless that you and life will ever change for the better. Believe me when I say these words, because like you, I've been there before. Hold on. Don't act on those lying suicidal thoughts. Hold on and create and live your better days.
Welcome, everyone, to Talking Back to Suicide. My name is Dr. Diane Kaufman, though I like to be called Dr. Diana for my creative self. I am a poet, artist, humanism and medicine awardee, a retired adult and child psychiatrist, and the founder director of the Hold On campaign for suicide prevention that uses the power of art to educate, connect, express, and heal. I'm here with my co-host, Kino Isaac, who's from South Africa. And Kino is a DJ, music entrepreneur, producer, and most importantly, a mental health advocate for independent artists. And our special guest today on Talking Back to Suicide is Eric Fisher. Eric has a black belt in two martial arts styles, American Kempo and Wado Rio, meaning way of harmony style. And he's a certified mental health counselor based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. He has over 13 years of experience working in outpatient and inpatient treatment settings in the US and Canada. He's a master practitioner of accelerated resolution therapy, ART, and also trained in eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, both of which are evidence-based treatments for trauma. His counseling approaches also include the evidence-based CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy treatment. He's DBT informed, as in dialectical behavior therapy, and engages clients as appropriate in SFBT, which is Solution Focused Brief Therapy. At his private practice, named Recovery Arts Counseling, Eric serves individuals, couples, and families locally and remotely. He hosts the Recovery Arts podcast, featuring with his invited guests discussions on addiction recovery, martial arts, men's health, mental health, emotional eating, ADHD, and much more. Eric is the author of The Martial Art of Recovery, Self-Mastery Practices to Subdue Addiction and Achieve Mental Wellness, that was published in 2024, and Buried Alive, 4 Ways to Free Yourself from the Dirt, published in 2025. Here's what one reviewer had to say about Eric's most recent book. Buried Alive, 4 Ways to Free Yourself from the Dirt, is an impactful book based on real life events, a revelation, with Eric brilliantly guiding his readers through his father's near-death experience and subsequent learnings. Delivering profound insights, Eric transforms life's devastating lessons into teachable moments. His emphasis on community and spiritual wellness is truly inspiring. More than just a book, it's a guide to stewarding our mental, emotional, and physical wellness, a powerful and uplifting read. So warm welcome, Eric, to Talking Back to Suicide, and we're delighted that you could join with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Kaufman and Kino. A pleasure to be here today with you both.
So I wanted to start in asking you about martial arts, right? How did you get involved with the martial arts, and what has that done for you for body, mind, and spirit?
Mm. I got started around age 10. My dad and I started with the Wado karate that you mentioned, and I started doing that as a preteen. And then later on, 16 to 18 years old for American Kempo. And as far as body, mind, and spirit, martial arts taught me a lot about discipline, about balance with the body and the mind, taught me a lot about self-control as well, which can range out of the dojo when it comes to emotions and relationships, thought processes. And so those are a few of the pieces that I got from the martial arts experience, especially when doing sparring. I'm a very kind of laid back, more passive individual. So when it came to doing sparring, I really had to learn how to find that assertiveness, a balance again, and a discipline when it came to doing the sparring. Like not going out of control with the sparring, going berserk, but also not being too passive either.
From Eric, your life experiences, your personal life, as well as your professional life as a counselor, I'd like you to speak on really the public health crisis of suicide, right?
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
uh, Share your perspectives on that.
You know, and I'll share it from the Canadian point of view since I'm up here in Canada that, and this is from, I think, the government of Canada back in 2024, that there's around 51 billion each year in healthcare expenditures and lost productivity when it comes to mental illness, poor mental health. When I'm working with people, the the concern with suicide is very multifaceted. And we see that when it comes to mental health concerns, addiction, the huge shadow of shame and guilt when it comes to decisions made, even life transitions that can be really difficult, such as going into retirement, just transitions in general, and people going through grief. That can be a significant aspect. And so when it comes to working with people individually, it's something that has to be on the lookout. It's something that has to be talked about. And as I have grown in my experience as a counselor, I've become more comfortable asking people those questions about, hey, how you doing? Is there any intent and or plan? You know, have you been having thoughts? And I've learned also to normalize the questions, like being able to say, hey, you know what? Some people during their life, they think about suicide or they have suicidal thoughts. Have you been having any thoughts of suicide? Especially talking with maybe a teenager, which is not who I usually speak with. I'm usually speaking with adults. Yet, hey, a lot of teens think about suicide. Have you been having any thoughts? So those are the few pieces that I've come to see is how multifaceted where it can be a concern that comes from a wide range of challenges. And I don't want to use the word like problems or like it's a sin or it's something that's wrong or defective with someone. It's because there's things going on in someone's life and normalizing that aspect for someone.
Do you think that there is, and this is not a loaded question, just a neutral question, is there, in your opinion, um, a different approach that we should take for men versus women?
Hmm.
What would be similar in the approach? Is there something different that we should be doing? Because I think the fact is that the most impacted population are older men. Of course, fundamentally, we don't want anyone to be ending their life by suicide, right? And perhaps especially young people where their life is ahead of them, right? And if you're an older person or an older man, right? You have a right to continue to live your life, right, with fulfillment, right, too.
I believe that's one piece on the end there, Dr. Diana, is how do we approach men when it comes to fulfillment? They might be different than women when it comes to fulfillment. Maybe they get that fulfillment women from um, maternal relationships or certain relationships in their life. And it's true for men too that the relationships in their life are important, yet also work or past work can be something to be looked at. We could look at resilience when it comes to men. Perhaps that could be a little different for men than when it comes to women. Men tend to seem to look at it from a concept stereotypically of I gotta pull the bull by the horns and do it all myself. Well, perhaps we could look at, can we get you involved with some mentors, some sponsors, some people in your friend group, some supportive professionals, so you don't have to do this on your own. In that way, it is similar for men and women. Yet for men, I think there's this idea that, oh, I got to do this all by myself. As far as things being similar, and I did want to bring up the Thumbs Up Foundation, which I think for the Hold On campaign, there's a lot of similarities with this organization that I contract with, and I'm a part of the team of the organization. They have a four-legged stool approach, and I think that really solidifies for men and women what needs to be looked at, and that's counseling, medical, which is continuing care as well, acute care, and then family programs, if they're available, which with the stool approach, they are available with this approach. It's called the Cool Family Solutions Program, and also integrated associated services. So there's four different puzzle pieces, if you will, for this four-legged stool approach. And men and women, regardless of gender, can be able to find support with that. So I like this quote, and I think it's really true for all of us that, and Kino, that this comes from Desmond Tutu. There comes a point where we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. And for men and women, I think when it comes to working with people with suicidal ideations and mental health challenges, can we have a prevention focused, person centered coordination framework, which the Thumbs Up Foundation uh, purports to use? And
You know the website address for the Thumbs Up Foundation?
yeah, it's the thumbsupfoundation.com.
Well, good. We'll add that to our notes, right? So our listeners can check it out. I was struck by that metaphor that you gave, that kind of a visual image. I think you said the huge shadow of shame. And I could visualize that. I saw this fearsome shadow overpowering, that person. Right? Speak a bit about shame.
Shame has often been described as spiritual suicide. And that comes from a book called, I believe, Spiritual Suicide. I forget the name of the author. Um, Yet, when we look at spirituality, it's the connection with ourselves, the connection with a higher power, community, connection with other people. So for me, that's God, that's Jesus. I am a Christian. That is an important part of me for spirituality. Yet when it comes to shame, shame makes someone think that there's no possibility for change. It corrodes the person's ability on a very deep, thematic, emotional, mental, spiritual level that change is possible. And so HOPE, which we've heard, hold on, pain ends. When it comes to spirituality, that is a huge piece for giving someone back freedom, but also humanity. When we think of addiction work, I think his name was Abraham Twersky. He was pretty fly for a rabbi. He's since passed on, yet he had this adage that spirituality is like vitamin C. We could take as much vitamin B as we want, drugs, gambling, whatever, but it's not fulfilling. Vitamin C, spirituality, fulfilling. And to give someone back that humanity and give someone back that freedom. And I believe that shame, when it comes to mental health concerns, addiction concerns, depression, etc., really takes away someone's humanity, sheds that from them, and also it sheds that ability to see freedom. And when it comes to suicide, looks like a way to have some type of control with the decision to give myself, quote, freedom, yet it comes at a cost, usually to the people that are left behind. Uh, so I think that shame, it's telling people that I'm a bad person at the core. Guilt is I did some choices that I'm not really uh, caring for. I don't feel great about. Yet shame is something really deep and in the recesses of our thoughts, and is often tied to the self-defeating, self-sabotaging thinking that I'm not worthy. I'll never be worthy. I'll never be able to get to a place where I can connect with somebody else. And so shame is definitely important to look at.
Mentioned humanity before. Tell us your thoughts. What does that mean when a person feels that they don't deserve to be alive?
Being human, I'm neither a I'm neither a turd on the sidewalk, less than human, nor am I like above other people on like a golden stool, grandiose, narcissistic, etc. I'm between those two, and that's showing humanity. Like we have humanity. We have the ability to make like by our own volition choices that are best for us. We have the ability to tap into spirituality, God, etc. We have the ability to look at what's best for us when connecting with other people. And I think a big part of humanity is that social connection that we have with other folks, even us coming together. You, yourself, Kino, myself, everyone on this podcast today, right now, it's all about connecting on a level of humanity that I have flaws, yet they don't define me. My past is my history, not my identity, as I heard a therapist once say.
Say that again. My past is.
My history, not my identity.
Yes, amen to that. Um, I'm interested in learning about um, art, ART, right? Could you explain about that and how it can be useful?
I did a session with someone yesterday, just a case example, and I'll keep confidentiality. So for this particular individual, they went through a few childhood traumatic memories, and they went from an 8 on what's called the Artometer, which is like a subjective units of disturbance scale. They went from an 8 out of 10 to a 1.5 out of 10 in about 1.5, 2 hours time for a few traumatic memories. And so keep the knowledge but lose the pain is the adage of this therapy. So there's negative images being changed to positive images in the brain. People don't forget, they don't have amnesia about what was traumatic for them, which can be a big piece when it comes to suicidal thoughts as well, because of excessive trauma and how just exhausting, excruciating that experience can be with trauma. They can also look at the possibility of something different. Is That's what ART gives them, is putting these different memories. If they're working on memories in the therapy, there's different ways to implement the therapy itself. The basic script, as it's called, there's different scripts. It's structured. It's a procedural type of approach. They put those memories in the past where they belong, and they put something in front of those memories. So now when they look back, it's something that gives more relief, more positive, more resilience, just better overall. And I asked somebody even a few weeks later if I see them again, hey, have you thought about, what we worked on with that traumatic memory? Actually, Eric, I haven't been thinking about that traumatic memory at all. It's like, great. It's not been intrusive. They don't have to actively avoid that traumatic memory. It's in the past where it belongs. So it gives that person the ability to come into the therapy room and actually gives them the power to make those changes. The brain wants to heal, it just needs that conduit.
It's the therapy specifically for experiences of traumatic events.
Can be for depression, Diana, can be for anxiety, can be for pain management, can be for even the fear of change. There's a script for the fear of change, and Diana. So there's lots of different possibilities for the use of the therapy.
So, Eric, I'm going to put you on the spot and tell me if this is not workable, right? Um, about a month or so ago, unfortunately, I was robbed when I was in a hotel lobby
What?
in Newark, New Jersey. So there I am, sitting in my chair, and a person who apparently had been following me, but I was not aware that I was being followed, uh, had entered the hotel. And before I knew it, there I am sitting in the chair, and my purse was next to my left hip, right against the edge of the chair. Right. So the purse was not on me, it was next to me in the chair.
Mhm.
And the person ran by. Almost, I explained to Kino, I felt, although I'm not a football player, the physical energy was like it felt I was being tackled. He rushed by and grabbed the purse and ran out behind me, um, to some doors that led out into the street. And I immediately stood up and started screaming for help and ran out the back door, still screaming, but he was gone. Um, and this was very, I mean, there are worse things in life, but this was traumatizing. I have to put, most importantly, I was not physically harmed. Potentially, if he had a weapon, I could have been injured, killed, whatever. That did not happen. That's the best news. But in my purse was my driver's license, my credit cards, all my cash, all insurance cards, everything. And so this was a very frightening, destabilizing situation for me.
Mm,
Um, so I did my best to focus my mind on what can I do? What can I do for myself to help myself? Um, I also tried to help myself not have flashbacks to other times. There was one other specific time I had been actually assaulted related to a robbery. So I'm
mm.
focusing, stay in the present, but don't stay in the fear. Do what I need to do. Um, let's say I came to you for help in the sense of, thankfully, this did not happen to me after a couple of days, but let's say it continued, of having trouble sleeping, having intrusive thoughts, just letting it consume me, right?
Mm.
I want to add one other thing to the story, that, of course, this was within hours of it happening, that I was, maybe it was the next day or so, I needed to go to the police station for a police report because, of course, I was flying back home to Oregon. That was the other part. And without identification, I wouldn't be able to fly back home. So that was another aspect of this. Um, but I was so shook up from the experience that I asked the front desk, was there a way that someone could, maybe the shuttle bus with the hotel, could they drive me to the police station? Because I was afraid to take a taxi, just in terms of being with an unknown person, right? Thankfully, I overcame that fear and I was able to take a taxi to the police station, and actually the taxi driver was very helpful for me. But let's say I continue to have fears about going out, strangers, sleeping, my overall safety. And I came to you and I said, Eric, please help me. Could you walk me through what that process might be?
Sure. And I'm just really frustrated that Kino wasn't there to help you out, but of course.
That's right. Yakina would have been, what, a superhero flying from South Africa. And I would have welcomed him with open arms.
I would have chased you
Uh,
down. I'm gonna chase him down. I'm that guy.
I knew you would have, Keno, if you had the opportunity.
I before you even go on, Eric, I was thinking, this did not happen to me in my thinking. However, maybe for a person who has a psychological vulnerability or they've had traumatic experiences in the past, an experience like this could tip them in to feeling depressed, hopeless. There's no one I can trust. Nothing is ever going to work out. And all or none thinking, life is not worth living. And it could spiral down possibly into, I don't want to live. It's not
Yeah,
worth it.
yeah. It could come there as far as suicidal ideations and potentially a plan. I would say to help you out, there'd be an assessment done as far as these different experiences, just to get them down, the pain points, the storyline, if you will, of these different scenes, as they're called in ART, different episodes, if you will. And for this particular episode that happened in the hotel, the beauty of ART is whatever you've just told me just now, Diana, would be the only parts I would need to know because you don't have to verbalize any more beyond that. It's all done with images, whatever you can pick up. And if you have a hard time with images, you would just think through it. So there's a solution to that too. So if we were to choose to work on that particular very overwhelming, very potentially traumatic memory of what happened with the robbery, it's you going from beginning to end with that particular scene. And there's a lot of other pieces that happen in the script, yet during the interventions you would get to change that to what you would like to have moving forward.
Think
And
more
it
about
being
that.
yeah,
That I would get to change it in some way. How would I be doing that?
using bilateral stimulation, since this isn't eye movement therapy, you would be going through the scene and you get to change the things that you would like to see. I'll give you another case example. I was working with a lady who was raped. She was assaulted by a man. And so what she did was she kicked the guy between the legs and threw him into a TV and got in a sports car and drove away. And now when she looks back, that's what she remembers predominantly. It's really hard for her to go back to what happened originally. And so you would be able to install that for you using guided imagery, using different directives for what's called positization, making things positive, more relieving. And there's different interventions. I don't want to get too much into it to solidify, make sure there's no bugs left in the system per se. Um, but that'd be a part of it for making sure that, hey, you get to change that robbery part to maybe where Keno in your ART director scene, he gets to come in
Yes.
and
Yeah.
help you, or whoever or whatever it is.
I
Yeah.
actually
One
read
thing.
about this. Sorry, while we're on the topic, just really quickly, I actually read about this. I can't remember which book because there's just so many books that you read. But every night before you go to sleep, like if your day never planned out how it was supposed to plan out or how you would have wanted it to plan out when you woke up in the morning, just change the image and go to sleep. And it does work.
Yes.
It is effective. Yeah. Yeah.
It's so true, Keno, because right before we go to sleep, we're either going into a depressive, either wave or spiral of, oh man, this is what happened today, or we're going into an anticipatory type of place of anxiety about what's going to happen tomorrow. Being able to focus on some of those positive aspects, 3 good things that happened today and why, can certainly shift. And that's what ART is doing on a very, like, very deep, thematic, accelerated level. Yeah.
I love that the phrase is art, right? As in creativity to create something new, or to take the pieces from the old, as it were, the past, and add to them or rearrange them for something beneficial to happen.
Yeah. And I saw that
I, I,
expressive arts. Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to add that with my own story that I also, I don't know, in a way had a mantra from this experience, which was what can I learn from this experience to keep me more safe? Knowing that there's things beyond my control and beyond anyone's control, but what's within my control to do and to in a way to wring that experience out, right? And get, I don't know, the juice that's going to be beneficial in keeping me safe. And one thing is, now when I'm walking with my purse, I use a crossbody strap around it, right? No longer will I ever just have a purse next to me, right? And those may seem small, but they're not small, right?
Hey, they add up. When I lived in DC back in the summer of 2008, we were told before living there to have our billfolds, our wallets in our front pocket. I was used to my back pocket, and that I still do that. It's those little changes. Yeah.
Now, I know that you have a book that you published last year, right? And it's about your dad, but I think it's also about your dad and even more. Could you share a bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, my dad was hunting for Native American artifacts, arrowheads at an overhang in a rural area of Tennessee, out in the woods with two friends, and he was in a hole about 8 or 9 feet deep. Depends on who you ask. And all the dirt fell in like an avalanche really quick, just to give you the quick synopsis. And a big rock fell on top of the dirt after all that dirt fell down. 200, 300 pounds. Again, depends on who you talk to. It was a heavy rock. So if it wasn't for that second friend that decided to come that particular day, which had never come before, actually, they came to his house and he decided to come. He's like, yeah, sure. Okay, I'll go. Without him, my dad would have died for sure because one of the other friends, Jason, was injured by that big rock that came down and was buried up to his knees. And so he had to be unearthed first before they helped get my dad out. So the book's about being able to intersect that particular experience with some different self help strategies, some different ways to approach life to help us not be buried by different things in our life, like shame, like guilt, like depression or addiction, things like that.
What was it like for your father in his own emotional recovery? Just listening to that story, I could start to feel terror in my own body.
I interviewed him 24 years later, which was just actually last year because it happened back in 2000 was when it happened. So, well, I guess it would have been 2 years now. Yeah. And it coming up on 2 years. And he mentioned to me that he did go out to another place to dig a few weeks later, yet he had, I think his words were the heebie jeebies, a little bit of an eerie feeling. As far as traumatic symptoms, he didn't have a lot of like major traumatic symptoms from what I understand. Although those thoughts and images, yes, they do. And he did have some physical impacts, at least acutely. Like he had broken ribs, uh, left lung contusion, dirt in every orifice, even after 3 showers. Um, So I remember him telling me in the initial interview, he said the main thing going through his mind was, I didn't think I would go out this way. And I think for a lot of people, when it comes to addiction, when it comes to different mental health concerns, that might have been a thought that does come up. I didn't think I'd come to this place. I didn't think I'd be moving this way. So
What was it like for you to know that your father had nearly died?
shocking, confusion, apprehension. We received news not immediately after the incident. We were actually coming out of our rural subdivision in a car that was coming in, from what I remember. Of course, memory is constructive, and I could be getting a lot of this quote wrong. Uh, Someone rolled down their window of the car coming in and said, "Hey, I heard that Tim, my dad's name, was in an accident. And we were like, what are you talking about? And then we found out later that that's what happened. So yeah, a lot of shock, a lot of confusion around what happened, a lot of hesitation, and just general apprehension about what's going on, what did happen. Because I was at that exact dig site 6 weeks prior, 6 Saturdays prior, and so I knew the general area where it happened.
Wow. And what led you to write the book? Because in a sense, it was decades later, yes, that you wrote the book. What inspired you to put pen to paper?
A big part of my life, Diana, Kino, and so I decided, hey, I want to find out if there's some nuggets that I can bring out of this experience, both vicarious with Dad, Jason, and Jerry, all three involved, and also me as a therapist. And that's since it was a big part of my life, and I did have an actual video interview done 5 years after the date with all three perspectives. I was able to word for word, no AI used by the way, um, word for word transcribe heavy, thick Southern accents, definitely thicker than mine, and uh, put those three different perspectives out, which is an interesting study in perspectives and perception as well, because they all do have different vantage points.
What are your thoughts? And I know you've interviewed Eric before, but now you have even maybe a deeper perspective on him.
Yeah, mainly deja vu. It was an awesome chat the first time around. But since we're on the book, Buried Alive, Eric, you mentioned to me 4 pillars that are in the book itself. Do you want to talk about that or mention the 4 pillars?
Yeah, really quickly. The 4 pillars are this importance of balance in our lives in different ways. And I go into different types of balance, like even with comparisons. I'm not comparing myself like to everyone in my life, yet I'm also not restricting myself fully from doing that because I could gain some information. So that, along with the importance of social connection, community. Number 3 is the Y concept, or sorry, the W concept. And I'm usually a bit coy on podcasts as far as what that is, but it's the word with. So methodology with research, um, resiliency with curiosity. So in martial arts, it's trying to take the space out, and I don't want to be a semantic, uh, like a rigid semantic person, yet, it's like a block. It's not a block and then a punch, it's a block with a punch. And so it's the ability to connect things together, not see them as separate entities. So the importance of with in our lives, social connection with self-care and solitude. So that, and the last part that I bring up out of those three is the ability to look at, balance, the W concept. Oh yeah, CIA. So the importance of CIA. So curiosity, introspection, and agency, taking agency.
Yeah, thank you. And we talked about ART or art. What about EMDR? You also focus on that. What is EMDR?
Oof, how much time do we have? uh, it's
Sum
been
it up
around.
fast.
EMDR, like ART, is like taking the bullet out of a wound so that person can heal. That wound makes things toxic and contaminated, and it's hard to heal. EMDR is another psychotherapy, evidence-based, for sure, trauma-informed, that allows that person to heal more so from the context of changing deep negative core beliefs to positive core beliefs on a deep thematic level, while also being desensitized to these previous traumatic events. So there's 8 phases to EMDR classically, and a big part of that is that installation of like saying, I am worthy. in the context of working on something trauma-based. So it's generalizable, it's self-referential, it's an I statement, and it's realistic for a person, you know. So
Yeah.
uh, that's really quickly. It's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. Say it 3 times real fast, and it's the ability to be able to. It's the ability to change perception, cognition, sensations, emotions, and images on a traumatic event. It can be used for depression, anxiety, addiction, and other concerns as well.
Okay. So, Eric, since we're on this show now that's, focused on the topic of suicide, like you did mention this, to me on my show, but now this is a different set of audience. So it's good to, define what art and EMDR is. In your experience and your career so far, like what does the percentage look like of people that you have seen that have had suicide ideation, suicidal thoughts? And
Hmm.
how effective has ART and EMDR been in eliminating those thoughts?
It's hard for me to put a finger on the percentage. I would say that it's quite high. I mean, sometimes I may miss, which is the case with one particular client when I was starting out in my work that did die by suicide. Um, so, I mean, I would say it's hard to give a percentage. I mean, I do work with a lot of people with depression and addiction, and I would say that it would be more often than not, there's been at least thoughts. Not everyone has an intent and or a plan, yet when it comes to EMDR and ART, that can vastly improve outcomes for folks, especially when they're working with me through the Thumbs Up Foundation, where there is coordinated care programs. They actually have a community care coordinator as part of that organization's approach, which means that even if I'm not speaking with them biweekly, weekly, whatever it is, they get that call frequently from that community care coordinator.
Yeah. So,
Based on the research, coordinated care programs will reduce care cost on an average of 40%.
yeah.
So
Now, what can we do differently with, numbers going up all the time? What can we do differently, to pull people into say, hey, there is methods, solutions, avenues to take instead of taking your own life? Like, what can we do more publicly?
I think that publicly we could look at some care coordination, like a care coordination team that supports navigation as opposed to individuals navigating a system alone. I think that's super important because for a lot of people, especially when they're feeling down, they're feeling out, a lot of shame, a lot of depression, perhaps a lot of anxiety, there's a vacillation that can happen. And it's hard to navigate a system alone. It's like, hey, go see a therapist or whatever. If it's a coordinated team approach, it's being able to support that navigation with care coordination and give that direction for somebody. Not do it for them, still cultivating resiliency, empowering them, yet it's empowering them with team support. So I think that's one of the major pieces that need to be looked at. Um, and also just knowing that when services are siloed, one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. Medical team doesn't know what the counseling team's doing, or they don't even know their names. That can be an issue. And I think being able to know each person's name on a team, which has been the privilege with the Thumbs Up Foundation, is super important because then that person feels like I'm a part of this care community. So,
Yeah. It's team effort, right? It's team effort. We need to,
yes.
get the big organizations out there to work with us small guys, and vice versa. We need to work collectively together, united as one, because we're all sharing the same cause.
Yes.
That day alone is an ambitious goal. You know, I think Diana knows that more than anybody. When Diana says she reaches out to people, they don't get back to her, then she runs into them, and then they act like, "Hey, okay, no, sorry, just being busy." So
Eric,
yeah.
Eric, what are your thoughts on why that doesn't happen more often? What are there policy problems, funding problems, territoriality? Why isn't care coordination a fundamental part of all service delivery?
I think it can be, this is my turf, this is my territory. There can be that mentality. Yes, I do believe a big part is the funding aspect. I do believe that policies, procedures, red tape in those different bureaucracy areas can be a concern. Yet, you know what? If it is a framework where we're able to actually coordinate, it can improve care flow, alignment with services, just general communication, outcomes, like the whole gamut. And we've seen that. Like we've done evaluations to show the validity and the reliability of what Harmonized Health, well, what the Thumbs Up Foundation is doing. Harmonized Health is a particular pilot project that's had certain, like a one, two, three different, um, different steps, different factions, if you will, HH1 and HH2. So, it's kind of like the hub and spoke model, which I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but it's kind of like the hub gives that central coordination. They give training and oversight and data evaluation support, but then the spoke is the local partnerships, like context delivery that's specific, and then community-based services like myself. And so it is possible to have both if people can look at, can we get away from the animosity and the competition and look at, can we focus on tailoring to the individual and what they need? And it's so important.
Yeah, amen to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Eric, you've mentioned a few times um, recovery, addiction recovery, or treatment for people who have become involved in substances and those substances grabbed a hold of their brain, okay, and led them into addiction. Could you speak on how you became involved in that treatment and lessons that you've learned? Also, from the perspective of prevention as well as ongoing treatment.
I sat down with a clinical director of an inpatient treatment facility in Mississippi, and God rest her soul, she's since transitioned from this life, and she's since passed on. And she asked me how much experience do I have working in addiction. I told her 0, and that's back when I first started. I was doing clinical work outpatient. Fast forward a few years, I was close to losing my position for certain financial reasons within the company, a lot of which was beyond my control. And thankfully, my supportive supervisor, Sheila, hats off to Sheila, she's like, "Hey, would you like to work at the inpatient treatment facility that we talked about, that I'd already known about?" Like, sure. I had no courses on addiction in university, bachelor's or master's. So I just sink or swim, jump right in. And I was working at this place for 10 months before I went to New Zealand for 15 months. And during the 10 months, I learned a lot. And then when I came to Calgary, I learned a lot more about what's underneath the surface of addiction, where the alcohol or the lauded or cocaine or gambling or sex or porn, whatever it is merely a symptom of something that's usually a lot greater. And the outpatient clinical team that I worked with and for really opened my eyes to just how many deep layers there are, multifaceted as far as working with folks that are on that journey.
Seems like, and we've talked about this before, shame can be a real obstacle in reaching out for help and also receiving the help that is available. What are ways that an individual can work with that shame, or loved ones help the person to be able to accept that help or reach out for that help?
Yeah, for loved ones, it's tough, because I really wanna push that person. I don't wanna see them die, you know? For those in addiction, it's kinda like, I don't wanna die, but I'd rather not live. Like, it can be a slow death in that way with using substances, you know? Um, if that makes sense. Like, because of the shame. Um,
What can loved ones do within the family, friends, when they see a person suffering?
I think it's being able to meet them where they're at when it comes to that suffering and those difficulties. It's being able to know the difference between helping and rescuing, asking open questions, being able to help out to a certain degree with boundaries in place, with rights or financially, for sure. Yet, knowing that enabling, another word used for that is deeply involved, and that comes from a pro-dependency book read by Dr. Robert Weiss, and that really gave me a good incentive that don't pathologize the people helping those that have family members in either active addiction or in recovery. They're deeply involved, just like somebody going through cancer treatment. So I would say attraction rather than promotion, which is an AA slogan. It's being able to not try to promote and push someone. I can attract what's good in my life and what's going well for me, and I can reach out here and there and say, "Hey, do you want me to listen, or do you want me to actively help you work on this issue?" I'm going to leave it there. And that's really hard. I would definitely encourage the family members to get some type of support for themselves, group wise or individually. Absolutely. So they can approach that family member with care, with compassion, uh, with flexibility. And so I think just a big piece, really, and it's true for even clinicians when I'm working with people that are not ready to make those changes, is meeting people where they're at and having that compassion, having that empathy. Um, yeah, and just being able to, I think it's, what is it? EAR, empathy, attention, and respect, and having that type of approach in communication.
How do you take care of your own mental health, especially as a practitioner of serving those who are in mental health distress? Taking in all those stories, all those experiences.
Went out with a friend, and my friend's from Ghana, so it's always amazing to hear his experiences. We went out to a place to hike just this last Saturday, and so I like getting out to the great outdoors and just seeing God's creation and just being able to be outside. Baths, definitely important for me. I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm a guy who likes bath bombs. And I do enjoy being able to exercise as well, just like hiking for sure outside, but also, strength training, things like that. Just doing things that are fun and playful. Like, I can't forget about fun and play with this work that I do. Otherwise, I'm gonna burn out quite quickly.
It's using that phrase "with" that you mentioned before, right?
Yes, yes. Exercise with being able to take some time just to rest.
I
Any
actually
other
need that
thoughts
right
you have?
now. No, like what you just said, before we could come on to the show, I was explaining to Diana, I've just been so overwhelmed over the last few days. And now listening to what you just said, that yes, I want to take that time out to rest, to exercise, have some fun. But then I also deal with all these thoughts going through my head about all these
Mm.
important projects that I'm involved in while exercising, while having fun, while taking a walk, you know? And I just can't get it out because I feel guilty, you know? I feel guilty that, okay, here I am having fun, exercising, and exercising can be fun, depending who you ask. But there's so much going on out there in the world that needs my attention. Do you ever get that feeling while you're hiking? While going up the mountain, oh no, but there's 10 patients who are waiting for me and they need me. Do you feel guilty?
Guilty, like, doing the self-care? Yeah, I mean, for sure, like, people do pop up in my brain that I'm working with, and, um, yeah, I should be at home looking at notes or preparing for the next session or
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's definitely that possibility. I think I heard from Marsha Linehan, the creator of DBT, if you're gonna be full in the future, hey, be totally in the future with those thoughts. If you're gonna be in the past, at least be in the past, mindful of being in the past in that moment in time. Like, I can't beat myself up if they do come up. I'll just stay in the future for as long as my thoughts are there until I come back to the present moment or I move to the past. So, I hear you though. It's like it's kinda like it could be I could see it being seen as like a form of survivor's guilt, hey, like, I'm being able to do this, yet I'm working with these folks that maybe are going through some things and, like, what gives me the right to be able to do this? I can see it going there, and thankfully, doing this for a while, that doesn't come up as much. I'm able to know that, "Hey, I gotta do my self-care," or I gotta have self-concern, or I'm not gonna be able to have concern for these folks like I'd like.
True.
That image of filling your own cup, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Just two more things, I want to bring up. Eric, the first time we met, you mentioned something, and I want to bring it up on the show because this is so impactful, and
Mhm.
I think also relatable to shame.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm frozen on my end.
You're back. I
Okay,
can
there we
see you
go.
again. Yeah.
Get back. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm not a bad person who did bad things. I'm a person who did bad things and I'm worthy of healing. And this is what you told me. This is your quote. And, just referencing, all the conversation that has been said about shame on the show today. It's a self-awareness for someone. Look, I did something bad. And bad could mean a lot of things to many people. You know, for Dana, getting drunk every weekend is not,
Oh,
you
yes.
know. For Eric, it's like, that's bad. So Eric decides, hey, okay, I'm going to go out with Dana. I'm also going to get drunk. And then the next day, there's so much guilt, flowing through Eric. Why? Why did I go out with Diana? But Diana's all good the next day, But, that's an example I'm using. But it's powerful to say to oneself the next morning, okay, look, I did something bad, but I am worthy of healing. And not many people see it that way, They just remain in that guilt forever. I'm a bad person. God hates me. I'm going to hell, you
Yeah.
know. So this is actually quite
Yeah.
powerful. And I wanted to share this on the show as well. And then I know you got a book that's coming up, and I called it Confessions of a Therapist. We had a laugh about it on my show. Do you want to mention that really quick?
Yeah, yeah. I finally found out the title would be Listening on Repeat Confessions of an Experienced Therapist. And so it's definitely not tooting my own horn. I do bring up my misgivings, my learnings, my errors as a therapist, but also I bring up ways of what did I learn from those experiences. And I guess some suggestions for people in the field, either seasoned or green coming in. I still consider myself a little green. I'm still learning, I'm not a glorified expert. So that book, it is final. The cover is finalized by my book cover designer, and it is edited. And the editor actually is in Oregon, Diana.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah,
Mhm.
I'm going through it right now though because I want to make sure confidentiality wise that anything that could be identifying has been taken care of. So that's the main concern. But yeah, thank you for letting me share a little bit about the book. Appreciate it.
Eric, when that is published and out, let us know, right? And we can help promote it on Talking Back to Suicide and Facebook.
Sure. Yeah, I certainly will let you know, Dana. Kino. Yeah.
I think
So,
this will be a
Eric,
good book
thank
for you,
you.
Diana, as well, or any therapist out there in the world. You know?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Eric, thank you so much for joining us today. How can our listeners learn more about you? Your website address or social media?
Yeah, recoveryartscounseling.com. That's counseling with two L's since I'm up here in Canada. And also Recovery Arts Counseling on Instagram, and also Eric Fisher, writer, on Instagram. And I mean, just look up Eric M as in man, Eric M. Fisher on LinkedIn, and you'll find me. That's a few of the places.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah.